It's noon. Hello, everybody. I'm not sure if anyone is here or not. If somebody has joined, if you could send in a comment on your LinkedIn, I'd appreciate it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start. And if anyone is there, that's great. If not, we'll just continue. And hopefully, you'll watch this live later. So, the topic of today is centered leadership, the self management path. As some of you who've attended my seminars know, that I created an emotional intelligence model, and I'm basing a lot of my presentations on the model because I'm very excited about it. And I truly think it's a holistic way of people looking at themselves. And the key to doing better is to be able to manage your own self, which is starts with self-awareness. So, with regards to this topic, I thought it would be cool if I, talked about a story that something that recently happened to me, which gives a perspective on how different things affect us, right? Interactions affect us, and these interactions, the way they affect us, and how we respond to them. Most of the time, we're not responding. A lot of the time, we are reacting. So, the idea of centered leadership is that you change and move away from reaction to what I called planned responsive action. And you can't move from reaction to planned responsive action if you don't have a sense of centeredness and you take care a little bit of your own body. So, to that effect, I'm going to go back to just the main slide. One of the decisions I've made in my presentations is I would like to offer a sense of calm for anybody who comes to my presentation because you don't take the time to take care of yourself. And to be centered, to be able to manage yourself, the most important thing is to first take care of your body. So, this is going to take just a minute. Let out all your breath. And then as you breathe in, try to fill up the bottom of your lung, the middle of your lung, and the top of your lung. And then let the air out, which naturally drops from top, middle, bottom. And make sure that the bottom of your lung empties out. We don't do deep breathing very often. A lot of us breathe only, halfway up our chest, which is one of the main things that makes it difficult for you to have a planned response. And pranayama, which is one of the yoga practices, or it's combined with yoga, is prana is breath. Prana is life, and yama is the breath of life. So, we need to breathe, really take a few seconds and practice our breathing. So, this is your opportunity to do that. So, if you can close your eyes, I'll create a safe space for you. Close your eyes. Think of a place that you find soothing. When you sit there, you feel like you can be yourself. And put somebody in the space if you want. It can be a person, it can be an object, it can be an animal. In your image, just put that person, animal, object in there. And then breathe in. Take a deep breath and let your breath out. And really put yourself in this space and see how you feel in this space as you take long, deep breaths, trying to fill in the bottom of your belly, the middle of your chest, and the top of your chest, and then letting it go. I want to tell you to have your eyes turned inward to your heart, like you're being soothing to yourself. Shoulders shouldn't be up and tight, relaxed, shoulder blades engaged, in a relaxed posture. And take another deep breath. And just take this moment to keep yourself in this really safe space and feel the calm. Feel it in your stomach, feel it in your chest, feel it in your upper shoulders. Relax the back of your shoulders. Now, I want you to find one spot in your body which may be hurting, which may be carrying stress. And as you breathe in, imagine that that breath is going to that spot. and then let go of your breath. Okay. So I hope you engaged in this and you had a little bit of calm that comes in, and we'll go to, back to what I want to talk about, which is emotional awareness. Emotional awareness is the first component of self-management, and you really can't manage anything, other people, if you don't manage yourself, right? You will all agree with that. And part of self-management is being emotionally aware, knowing your boundaries, having some self-confidence. So I want to talk about the story I wanted to talk about earlier. Now that you're coming, hopefully you'll listen to me. So recently I was having a conversation with a colleague, and we were, going back and forth about what needed to happen. And the person started using this language, which is you should do this, and you should do this, and you should do this, and you should do that. And some of you know that I've been through some health issues. I'm happy to be back, happy to be working, but I have some limitations, and I've learned how to be very compassionate to myself. And I felt very pushed, and I was trying to explain why this would be too much for me to do. But what I found happening to me is I found myself tearing up, and I felt my chest getting really tight. And I took a pause and I let the person continue, and I took a deep breath. And I understood where that was coming from, because when I was ill, I was so hard on myself and I kept pushing myself to places that I couldn't go. And this felt like there was an authority figure who was telling me what I needed to do. And if I didn't do it, I wasn't doing a good enough job. And of course, that comes from being self-critical at a younger age and not trusting that I was doing enough and a good enough job and pushing myself. So, I became aware of what these emotions were and where they were coming from. And that sort of calmed them down. And then I was able to assert myself and tell the person that, no, I understand you think this is the way to go, but let me tell you where I'm coming from. It's taken me a very long time to get here, to be self compassionate, to understand my limits. So this comes to the emotional awareness and the boundary awareness, and then having the self confidence to state to this person that this is something that is difficult for me to do at this point. So responses, reactivity come from different places. And it takes a while, if you're not emotionally aware and if you're not aware of where they're coming from, to be able to know why the emotions are coming up. And it doesn't matter. I mean, one is you need to know why the emotion's coming up. And then the next part is to calm yourself down and then figure out what this current situation is and how is it that you want to respond to it. And you won't really be able to do that if you don't understand the basis of these emotions, in some ways, or how you're reacting, or what your tendency to react is. Let me explain that. So triggers create these emotions, right? And then you have responses, and I'll put it in sort of the trauma framework: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fight involves, you just want to, you get upset, you get angry, you get defensive. So let's take an example of a boss who, I mean, not a boss necessarily, you're in a team meeting, and somebody who is not self-aware, like a manager who is not self-aware and is frustrated, would take, when somebody else in the team is talking about something, they may not be able to listen to them because they are frustrated and they're impatient, and so they may come across as dismissive and, short tempered. um, you might have experienced some parts of this, and so this is what we're talking about, which is, if you're feeling that way, then you're off balance, and then you're not leading in the best way possible, right? So somebody who has understood what I'm talking about, gotten a little bit, I'll just go to, so you can see the self-management part. Someone who has begun to understand and become emotionally aware, like, oh, I'm frustrated, but maybe I'm not frustrated about what's happening here, but I'm carrying frustrations from home, other relationships, possibly the stress of, what I need to deliver. But those frustrations are there, but they're not going to help the team meeting, and they're not going to help if you're dismissive with your teammates, right? Because you actually want to get the project done, which means you have to listen to what your team is telling you, and work with them and negotiate with them. So they're going to respect that you're trying to be helpful, and then they will actually help you finish that deadline. If you're carrying something from home, again, they're not going to be helpful if you bring that emotion into the team, and you're going to bring down the team morale. It could be the manager, it could be you as part of the team. So it could work both ways. But this is really about understanding that in leadership, being centered is super important, right? Because you're the mirror. If you're carrying any emotion and you bring it in, whether you realize it or not, other people are going to feel it, absorb it, and then it's not really going to help morale. It's not going to help things go forward. And for you, it's necessary for you to acknowledge the emotion. And this is where vulnerability comes in. And that might be difficult for some leaders, where you could come in and just verbalize it. You say, I'm having a hard day. I'm a little frustrated. So I might be a little short. Excuse me. Other people can be understanding about it, and they'll know it's not about them. They'll know that something going on. This is a difficult day. Versus, you also understand that you're in that place. You sort of self manage it, and you come with a different attitude to the team, and say, okay, I'm going to compartmentalize what's happening at home. I shouldn't really be bringing it to the team. I need to compartmentalize this one interaction. You might have had an interaction just before you walked in, and that might be causing this stress. And you still have to take a few minutes to compartmentalize that if possible. And that's the skill that you have to learn to then be able to come to the meeting and discuss. Now let's look at, if so, you need self-confidence. You need self-confidence to be a little bit vulnerable. You need self-confidence to be able to tell the person what's happening with you. And if you don't like something that's happening, you need to be clear and have independent thinking to be able to express that. Now, what happens if you are not if you don't have boundaries, which is the core of assertiveness, you can't really assert yourself, right? So it might be that, a team member with poor boundaries and low confidence may take on extra work from the colleagues, even though their plate is full. And then he or she becomes passive aggressive and resentful that they're taking on all this work. And then that's going to come out as complaining behind the backs of others. And them not being assertive is going to make it difficult for them to tell you what's going on. And so that comes into the interpersonal aspect, right? In interpersonal management, you need to have empathy for the other person. You need to have emotional awareness that comes from self-management. You need to be able to verbally communicate what's going on with you. Your non-verbals need to match your verbal communication, and you need to be able to be assertive. So, and what all of these, empathy, verbal communication, non-verbal communication, assertiveness, all of that is what you bring into conflict management. And we cannot say that as leaders or people who work that there's never going to be conflict. There's going to be some sort of minor conflict here and there. There's also maybe not going to be apparent conflict, but there could be perceived conflict because the person, put yourself in the situation. You may be thinking there's a conflict because you're coming from maybe a space of where what I was talking about, like a flight response. This particular thing seems dangerous. It may not be dangerous. But if you're coming in with the perspective that is dangerous, you would need to have somebody to talk to say, hey, is this really a conflict? Or maybe it's not. Maybe I'm perceiving it. So understanding that when you are coming into a situation, that you're bringing yourself into the situation is the most important part to be a center leader. So you need to be that aware person. You need to understand that that's going to, if you're not aware, you're not going to be able to effectively manage interpersonal relationship. Now, in terms of independence, if you are you have pretty good boundaries, you have empathy, you feel like you know that what you want or not, like this would be a great example. So a leader is taking a new initiative that they believe will compromise the team's current priorities. And so the leader wants to protect the team. So because she knows that she has boundaries, she would go to her supervisors and say, "Hey, I would really like to support this initiative, but there's this much going on in this project, and my team's capacity is at 100%. So if you really want me to take on this initiative, you'll have to tell me how to manage my resources or help me figure out what other things I can drop off the priority list." So that's boundaries. That's understanding, like, I can only do this much, I can't do that much, and also being confident enough and independent enough to assert yourself. So I hope you can now see the connection between, like, as you're able to manage yourself and learn self management skills, they all interact with interpersonal skills. And I'll go back to part of how do you manage yourself is taking an inventory. If I'm feeling resentful, like, again, resentfulness is an emotion, right? If I'm feeling resentful, is it because somebody else is, like, usually resentfulness is somebody else's, it's not fair. Someone else is making me do more than I want to do. Then you do have to ask yourself the question, where can you draw the line? Because the other person can't get you to do that much or force you to do that much if you draw the line. So resentfulness often comes from not drawing a line, your boundaries, and not being aware of what your boundaries are, not being aware of how much you can do. So the example that I started off with is I felt my boundaries being pushed, and an older self of mine may have said yes and given in and then felt resentful. Or sometimes it's not resentfulness, sometimes it can be sadness and helplessness, because you get into that sort of free, flight response, a helpless response. I can't do anything about it. I don't understand why this person is pushing me in this direction. I don't feel like I can stop this person from pushing me in this direction. So it could go be resentful, it could also go in terms of this sort of almost helpless, sad state. So when your boundaries are pushed and when you don't know them, and you allow yourself, without your knowledge, to get into a space where you're not being able to be assertive and independent, there's going to be emotions like resentment, sadness. It's not fair is the thought process that comes with it. I always differentiate feelings from thoughts, because we need to know what that thought process is. And I go back to my example of feeling like my colleague was pushing me to do more. My thought process then was, I can't do this, I can't do this, why is this person asking me to do this? And then I had to sort of slow down and say, this person can ask, but I can't do this because X, Y, and Z. And I need to really communicate why I can't do it in the way this person wants to do, and how I would operate better to be efficient. So this is the other part, knowing yourself and being able to articulate how you would function better given your own personality or your own style. You do have an ethical responsibility in the work environment to work with your boss, or as a leader try to accomplish tasks, right? So there's things that we have to do because we're being paid, because ethically we need to do it. Hopefully you have purpose and it fuels you to complete these tasks. So you need to understand that you do want to do it. So, I mean, and that's where confidence, self-confidence comes in, self-trust comes in. So when you trust yourself and you know that you want to do this and you're going to do this, and you can go with that confidence to the other person, you say, I do want to do this, but I need to do it in this particular way. I hope that was helpful, because that's how you move away from feeling like you're being pushed, like you're helpless, um, and or you have these reactive emotions. And so I'll take one more example, in terms of conflict management, right? If you are unable to be aware and recognize how you're emotionally triggered, like we talked about, then you would have a very hard time in negotiating a conflict. For example, two top teammates disagree on the strategy or the directions of the company. One person who is not emotionally aware may become defensive and raise their voice and turn the whole business disagreement into a personal attack instead of saying this is a business disagreement. And the other person lacking, maybe who's lacking confidence. Let's put two people. One person who is less emotionally aware and defensive, and the other person who's lacking independence and fearing confrontation, therefore just shuts down conversation and acquiesces, and they're going to feel bad later, right? So the person who is acquiesces is the one without boundaries, difficulty asserting their boundaries. The person who is angry and is emotionally unaware and is pushing their agenda is somebody who is, again, not emotionally aware and possibly not great at negotiating and not great at listening to the other person, and we don't know where they're coming from. But this combination is not going to get you to an agreement, a workable, when we talk about business agreements, they say they need to be workable, lasting, right, and executable. But if you're on two ends, one person acquiesces and one person pushes it, eventually there's just going to be bad emotions around it, and this negotiation and this contract is not going to carry through. On the reverse, say there's a heated debate in a team about something that went wrong, and the leader, maybe feels the urge or the impulse to blame somebody, but instead takes a step back and says, the goal here isn't to blame, right? It is to understand what happened so that we can improve. This approach then is driven by this need to self actualize, which is in self management, wanting to do a better job, wanting to help the team, wanting to raise the bar. So it's like, hey, we did something wrong. Let's not blame anybody. Let's figure out, what the actual steps are and how we can fix this problem. You're going to get a much better response because then you don't put others in a defensive state. So, one of the key ingredients of being a good centered leader is if you can be curious. If you can be curious, take the questions with curiosity, not with the need to find someone to blame. And we say, and you really take that attitude of curiosity, today's a new day. We're going to try to fix this problem. And that takes a little bit of practice, right? Because the instinct is to feel bad about it and want to figure out, who, what, where, why did this go wrong, in that sort of reactive mode versus this sort of calm, like, okay, it happened. There's nothing we can do. This is out of our control. This happened yesterday. Today's a new day. Let's figure out what we can do to fix this. Hey, you tell me what you think happened, which could have gone better. Hey, you tell me which thing, what you think we could have done better. So you get the engagement of people to really think about what could have happened better in terms of the common goal, which is we still need to fix this problem. So your focus more on the common goal of fixing the problem. Your thought process is also that everybody is equally vested in fixing the problem, regardless of if there are people who are fully vested or not, which I've been in teams. But I think I've seen it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you go in with the attitude that, hey, you're all going to want to contribute, you really didn't want this mistake to happen. You are all feeling bad that it happened. I'm feeling bad that it happened. I'm the leader. I'm feeling bad it happened. So I'm giving grace to everybody, and we're all going to work towards a common goal. It is more likely that you're going to get a positive response because you are being that centered leader and not making them feel bad. So I'm going to go to what I wanted to talk about a little bit because this kind of ties into being centered, right? So in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, water, rest. Some food, water, shelter, most of us who are working, I think, have it. Rest, we may not be getting. That is definitely a trigger. Security, safety. I talked about the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. Do you feel safe and secure? And when we talk about this, it doesn't mean like, is a burglar coming to burglarize your house, but are you feeling safe in the environment that you're in? Are you feeling safe within yourself that you can take your problems, your vulnerabilities, and know that you trust yourself that even though you're going through a bad phase, it's going to get better. When you feel safe within yourself, you can carry that safety into an environment. If you're feeling unsafe within yourself, and that's where we can talk about maybe even anxiety. It's that unsafety of not being sure, right? You're going to take that to any other place. So safety is not just the sort of the safety that we think about in terms of physical safety. It's a lot about the emotional safety that you feel. Whether, if you're feeling emotionally unsafe in your home environment, that's going to get carried through. If you're feeling emotionally unsafe in the work environment, that's going to affect it. Love and belonging. Um, there's a need to belong. There's a need to feel cared for. If that's being thwarted, that's going to affect your centeredness. Esteem. Esteem can be two things. I want you to understand it's self confidence. One is esteem about just an inherent sense of feeling worthy. I will probably say this every single time I talk, because so often some people don't feel just this sense of I'm okay just the way I am. There's a lot of parts of me that are okay. And then the other part is sense of self-esteem from accomplishment, what you do. And again, in the moment, if something goes wrong, it may become a big thing of I've really screwed up, I've messed up, instead of, okay, this particular thing here, something went wrong, but I have all these accomplishments and I know how to do all this. Then how do I bring this to the solution? So that's something that is constant work, emotional, mental work, to keep up your esteem. Because when you have your esteem, you're going to be better at being centered. Self-actualization is achieving one's potential. Maslow talked about, you have to have every need met to get to self-actualization. I don't think that's necessarily true. I've worked with a lot of people. A lot of people are trying to self-actualize. Sometimes people are trying so hard to self-actualize that they're actually not keeping themselves safe, and they're not working on their belonging. And they may be up here working hard in this growth process, but they are thwarting some of their own needs, which makes them accomplish stuff, but you're still in a little bit of pain, which also means that you're going to be reactive, because wherever there's that kind of pain, there's a possibility of more reactivity. So I just want you to all think about that. Is your growth and achievement being at the cost of happening at the cost of some of the basic needs that you really should be meeting for yourself? And self-transcendence, I'm big on this. It's the sense of meaning. This was not there in the initial Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Meaning making, finding clarity in where you are, who you are, what your purpose is a very important part of driving good leadership and centered leadership. So I hope you got something out of this. And so the tips and tools I sort of want to leave you with is, can you be compassionate with yourself? Work on your awareness every day. Like, take one thing and say, what is the one thing that I did really well today, and how did that make me feel, and how do I carry that feeling forward? What are the one thing I did well? How did that make me feel, and how do I carry that forward? If you want to reflect on maybe the one thing that I won't say you didn't do well, the one thing that I can improve on. Now, what is one thing that I did that I could actually do a little bit better on? And how do I do that? And let me make a plan for that. What's the one thing I want to improve on? How do I do that? And let me make a plan for that. Just these two questions at the end of the day, two reflective questions. Managing, how's my energy? Am I feeling safe? Look at this. Am I feeling safe? Is there a place where I can get some love and affection and belonging that'll help me feel better? Feel like, I'm connected in this world, and there's some sense of, connection is a big part of meaning making, right? Other than meaning making about, I'm passionate about my job, I'm passionate about my cause, which, for me, certainly I'm doing these live talks because I'm really passionate about helping people improve their mind health so they can be better for themselves. And then, of course, then the trickle effect is that, you're better as leaders. And I think leadership is important because nobody taught me to be a leader. And, that's where my passion comes from, is I want to help people become better leaders, because it was a much longer journey for me. So if I can speed it up for somebody, that would be great. So awareness, What's your energy? Manage your energy. Give yourself your basic needs. Practice calm, whether if that's running for you or going for a walk for you or eating an apple, really enjoying that apple, watching a Netflix show. Create some calm in your everyday practices. It's a practice of consciously creating calm for yourself. So I want you to think about that because that's really important for being centered. And then things that happen that are difficult are events. They're not, don't globalize them. They're not your whole life. Usually there's just an event. So if you come every day with knowing that this is just an event happening right now, what is my awareness? How do I manage my energy? How do I figure out how to work with this event? Then you're more likely to have a planned response versus a reactive response. So I'm going to leave you with all that. And then somebody sent me this Instagram video, which I think summarized Maslow's law of hierarchy. I'm going to play that. It's going to be 30 seconds. And then I'm going to end the live. I didn't get any questions. So I'm just going to end the live. And I hope you all got something from this if you are here watching. Let me see if I can play this. I guess it's not working. Oh, okay. So anyway, this person talks about the 5 things, which is, in life, you need to have the 5 practices you need to have, being, falling in love, being in love, have some meaning in life. This is the last thing, having companionship, having a purpose, and enjoying art and nature, because those are things that bring joy to people. So enjoying art and nature, being in love with anything, anybody, the connection part that I talked about, the practice of finding calm in yourself and finding purpose in your life, and then finding meaning in all of it. So those are the things that you need to practice to have a more centered life. And in the world of AI, it seems to be people connection seems to be getting lost. So I think people are beginning to talk about that. And me doing these live sessions, my hope is that more people will start coming and there will be interactions, and I think that will be really helpful for people. So with that thought, I hope you have some really good interactions today and you take some of this stuff away and you have a less reactive day. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend after this. Take care.